Imagine a world where the ground beneath your feet is not a solid foundation, but a ticking clock counting down to a cosmic reset. For millions of years, life on Earth has flourished in a delicate balance, blissfully unaware of the chaotic firing range that is our solar system. We often perceive our history as a steady climb toward progress, but the geological record tells a much more violent and humbling story of survival. Deep within the crust of the Yucatan Peninsula lies a scar that reminds us of how quickly an entire era can be deleted from existence. 65 million years ago, a mountain of rock and ice screamed through the atmosphere, forever altering the trajectory of every living cell on our planet. Today, we live in a golden age of stability. But the cosmos has a long memory and is constantly preparing for its inevitable second strike. This is the story of our future history, a scientific exploration of how humanity might face a catastrophe on an unimaginable, planet-altering scale. 2 years before the end, a silent messenger was detected by our telescopes drifting through the dark void toward a date with our destiny. At first, it was just a coordinate on a screen, a mathematical curiosity that slowly transformed into a source of global, existential dread for billions. Since that discovery, the eyes of the world have been glued to the heavens, watching a pale speck of light grow into a monstrous omen. While most of humanity grappled with the news, a few remote corners of the world remained in blissful ignorance of the coming celestial fire. In high-tech laboratories and mountain observatories, the collective brainpower of our species raced to find a way to deflect the incoming kinetic hammer. In the city of Bonn, scientists like John Smith analyzed ancient core samples to understand the sheer energy released by previous asteroid impacts. These thin layers of green spherules are the physical ghosts of the Cretaceous period, proving that a single day can extinguish a global ecosystem. The data is chilling. An impact of this magnitude would obliterate life on a continental scale within the first few minutes of the collision. Today is the day of the mission, and the largest observatories on Earth are all synchronized, focused on a single, terrifyingly fast-moving target. Teams led by astrophysicists like Noah Boyle have calculated the trajectory with agonizing precision, hoping for a miracle of modern engineering and physics. Space agencies have launched a desperate gamble, a nuclear-armed probe designed to nudge the comet just enough to miss our fragile blue marble. This probe carries a warhead 800 times more powerful than the atomic bombs of the past, representing our final stand against the dark. Billions of people are holding their breath, waiting to see if science can overcome the raw, indifferent momentum of the universe itself. The moment of impact arrives not with a whimper, but with a roar that defies the laws of acoustics. As the nuclear warhead detonates, a blinding flash illuminates the void. But the comet's momentum remains terrifyingly unchanged. Gravity is an unforgiving master, and our best technology has proven to be nothing more than a pebble thrown at a mountain. The news of the mission's failure ripples across the globe, turning the final hours of civilization into a somber vigil. In Mexico, Fernando Martinez begins a desperate trek home, unaware that his destination is the very center of the coming inferno. Scientists realize that the atmosphere, which usually protects us from small debris, will be as thin as tissue paper against this giant. An object 8 miles across doesn't just fall, it punches through the air, creating a vacuum in its wake that pulls the sky down. The kinetic energy released will be equivalent to 100 million megatons of TNT, a number that breaks our ability to comprehend. Upon contact, the crust of the Earth behaves like a liquid, splashing upward in a ring of molten rock miles high. A fireball 10 times hotter than the surface of the Sun expands outward, incinerating everything within a 1,000-mile radius in seconds. For those in cities like Houston, there is no time for fear. There is only the sudden, absolute transition into light and heat. This initial blast is followed by the electromagnetic pulse, a silent ghost that instantly kills every electronic heart on the planet. Lights flicker out, communication networks collapse, and the digital history of humanity vanishes into a permanent, dark silence. In the laboratories of Caesar, the scientists watch their monitors go black as the pulse races across the European continent. But the physical shock is only beginning. As the comet strikes the ocean, it displaces enough water to rewrite the coastlines. A tsunami nearly a kilometer high is born, a wall of energy that moves across the deep ocean at the speed of a jet. Unlike a normal wave, this is a surge of pure mass, carrying the weight of the sea into the heart of the land. Caribbean islands are simply rolled over, disappearing beneath the surge as if they were never there at all. Along the east coast of America, the water races inland for hundreds of kilometers, turning modern skyscrapers into concrete tombstones. In New York City, a peripheral wave 6 meters high surges through the streets, drowning the canyons of Wall Street in salt and debris. As the initial floodwaters recede, the survivors face a much more terrifying and prolonged global threat. The impact ejected trillions of tons of vaporized rock and debris into the upper reaches of our atmosphere. This incandescent material doesn't stay in space. It falls back to Earth, heating up as it re-enters. Within minutes, the sky itself begins to burn, turning into a global broiler that bathes the surface in heat. Ground temperatures soar towards several hundred degrees Celsius, causing forests to spontaneously burst into massive, unstoppable flames. For any life caught in the open, the planet has become a furnace, offering no escape from the infrared rain. In Paris, desperate crowds seek refuge in the deep limestone tunnels of the catacombs, hiding from the hell above. Below the surface, the thick layer of earth acts as a shield, but the air grows thin and heavy. The smoke from a billion burning trees begins to mix with the settling dust, creating a suffocating, toxic veil. This marks the beginning of the impact winter, where the sun is literally blotted out by a planetary shroud. For months, the surface of the Earth will be draped in a moonless, starless night that never ends. Without sunlight, the engine of life photosynthesis grinds to a sudden and catastrophic halt across the entire globe. This is the collapse of the first link in the food chain, a biological domino effect that threatens everyone. Lush rainforests wither into grey graveyards, and the once fertile plains become silent deserts of ash and frozen mud. In the darkness, the temperature begins a steep, merciless dive, plunging the world into a new, artificial ice age. Even in tropical regions, the air turns bitter and frost-covered, killing species that have never known the cold. Modern civilization, built on the assumption of a stable climate, finds itself utterly helpless against this cosmic winter. Fuel reserves vanish, power grids remain dead, and the fight for the basic necessities of life becomes brutal. Yet, in this graveyard of a world, life proves to be more stubborn than the vacuum of space. Small pockets of survivors and resilient organisms begin to adapt to the shadows, waiting for the light to return. As the darkness deepens, the survivors learn that the greatest enemy isn't just the cold, but the silence of the soil. In this new world, the traditional methods of agriculture are useless, as seeds refuse to wake up in a sunless world. However, nature has a backup plan for when the lights go out, a kingdom that thrives on death and decay. Fungi, the great recyclers of Earth, begin to dominate the landscape, spreading their mycelial networks through the rotting forests. For a brief period in Earth's history, mushrooms become the tallest structures on the surface, feeding on the fallen giants of the past. While the plants wither, these organisms turn the catastrophe into a feast, proving that life always finds a way to pivot. Deep in the oceans, the situation is even more dire, as the microscopic plankton die off, causing the marine food web to collapse. Sharks and whales, once the kings of the sea, now roam a liquid desert, searching for calories that no longer exist. But in the deepest trenches, near volcanic vents, life carries on as if nothing has changed, powered by the Earth's inner heat. These extremophiles are the ultimate survivors, sheltered from the cosmic chaos by miles of protective, insulating water. On land, humanity must look to these survival specialists to learn how to endure a world that has become alien. Small communities begin to repurpose old mines and bunkers into life arcs, using geothermal energy and hydroponics to survive. Every calorie becomes a triumph of engineering, and every light bulb is a precious sun that keeps the darkness at bay. The psychological toll is immense, as the memory of blue skies and warm breezes begins to feel like a beautiful, distant myth. In this era of isolation, the few remaining radio signals become the only threads connecting a fractured and lonely species. Families like the Vardos trek through the frozen ruins of Europe, guided by the hope of finding a place where the air is still breathable. They encounter strange new atmospheric phenomena, like ash auroras, where charged particles illuminate the soot-filled sky in ghostly greens. The Earth itself is undergoing a radical chemical transformation, as acid rain begins to leach heavy metals into the remaining water. Every sip of water must be filtered through layers of charcoal and prayer, a constant reminder of our new, fragile existence. But even in the depths of the impact winter, the human spirit refuses to be extinguished, flickering like a candle in a hurricane. As the months drag into years, the chemical haze in the stratosphere begins to settle, but the crisis isn't over. The sulfur aerosols that block the sun are slowly replaced by a much more persistent greenhouse effect. Millions of tons of carbon dioxide, released by the impact and the global fires, now begin to trap heat. The world swings from a brutal, frozen winter into a humid, suffocating greenhouse, a climatic whiplash. Glaciers that grew during the darkness now melt at a terrifying rate, causing sea levels to fluctuate wildly. For the survivors, the environment is a moving target, shifting from ice to steam in a geological heartbeat. In the ruins of Mexico, Fernando finds that the Great Impact Crater has transformed into a toxic, boiling lake. The air here is thick with sulfuric gases, a reminder of the primordial Earth before life tamed the atmosphere. Yet, even here, at the edge of the abyss, tiny extremophile bacteria begin to colonize the cooling lava. This is the life clock in action, the planet's innate ability to reboot itself after a total system failure. Biologists like Kenneth Story observe that while many species are lost, the survivors face no competition. In a world without predators or rivals, the humble survivors of the catastrophe find a vast, empty stage. The collapse of the old hierarchy allows for a radical explosion of evolutionary creativity and new forms. We see this in the past. When the dinosaurs vanished, the tiny, scurrying mammals finally had their moment. History is a series of exits and entrances, and humanity is now standing in the wings of a new era. In the oasis at the foot of the Pyrenees, the Vado family begins to build a new kind of settlement. It is a society born from the ruins, where cooperation is not just a moral choice, but a biological necessity. They trade seeds preserved in bunkers and knowledge salvaged from books, the DNA of our lost civilization. The children born here have never seen a skyscraper or a jet, yet they understand the stars better than we did. They look at the fading scar of the comet in the sky, not as an omen, but as a landmark of their origin. As the toxic haze finally begins to thin, the first true sunrise in years touches the surface of the Earth. It is not the golden sun we remember, but a pale, filtered light reflecting off a world that has been scrubbed clean. The atmosphere is still thick with CO2, creating a heavy, stagnant air that favors the growth of giant, hardy ferns. These primitive plants, ancestors of the survivors of the Great Dying, begin to reclaim the Grey Plains with explosive speed. For the first time since the impact, the color green returns to the landscape, a visual signal that the planet's pulse is steadying. However, the recovery of the biosphere is a messy, chaotic process filled with biological experimentation and dead ends. New species of insects, smaller and more efficient, begin to emerge from the leaf litter to pollinate the new world. In this era of giants, some survivors grow to massive proportions to take advantage of the high-energy, high-carbon environment. The oceans, though still acidic, see a resurgence of jellyfish and mollusks, the resilient architects of the new marine ecosystem. Humanity, once the dominant apex predator, now finds itself as just another curious participant in this grand biological theater. Our relationship with nature has fundamentally shifted from one of exploitation to one of deep, observational reverence. The survivors in the Pyrenees oasis have built a seed cathedral, a structure dedicated to the preservation of planetary diversity. Here, they study the few remaining animal species, acting as stewards for a world that no longer belongs to them. The lack of heavy industry has allowed the Earth to heal its chemical wounds, leaving the water clear and the air crisp. Without the constant noise of a digital civilization, the survivors rediscover the profound, meditative power of planetary silence. They use old solar panels and wind turbines salvaged from the ruins to power their minimal, essential life support systems. Every piece of technology is treated as a sacred relic, a tool to bridge the gap between two very different epochs. Communication between the few remaining human enclaves is slow, carried by physical travelers across the vast, changing wilderness. These wayfinders map the new world, documenting the shifting coastlines and the birth of new mountain ranges. The geography of the Earth has been rewritten, and we are the first cartographers of a strange, beautiful, and terrifying planet. In this new dawn, the air is thick with the scent of ozone and wet earth, a sensory reboot for the human race. The global temperature begins to stabilize as the excess carbon is slowly sequestered by the aggressive new vegetation. Massive forests of giant horsetails and club mosses stretch toward a sky that is becoming a deeper, clearer blue. These plants are the lungs of a recovering world, working tirelessly to scrub the atmosphere of its toxic past. As the weather patterns settle, the survivors witness the return of seasonal cycles, though they are more extreme than before. Massive storms, fueled by the warm oceans, sweep across the continents, carving new river valleys in their wake. Humanity adapts by building modular, wind-resistant structures that can be easily moved or reinforced against the elements. We are no longer masters of the terrain, but nomadic students of a planet that demands constant vigilance and respect. In the coastal enclaves, people harvest the abundant jellyfish and kelp, creating a new, sustainable, marine-based economy. The memory of the old world becomes a collection of folk songs and digital myths passed down to the new generation. Children play in the rusted skeletons of old cities, treating the steel beams as climbing gyms and historical puzzles. To them, a smartphone is a mysterious artifact of a lost age, as alien as a stone tool from the Paleolithic. Education focuses on biology, ecology, and the ethics of survival, ensuring that the mistakes of the past are never repeated. The Seed Cathedral in the Pyrenees becomes a global hub for the few remaining human tribes to exchange genetic data. This network of cooperation is our species' greatest achievement, a social evolution born from the fires of the comet. We have learned that our true strength lies not in our technology, but in our ability to empathize and collaborate. As the night sky clears, the survivors look up at the stars with a new sense of cosmic perspective and humility. The moon, once a lonely neighbor, is now a reminder of the celestial mechanics that both sustain and threaten us. We track the near-Earth objects with primitive but effective tools, vowing to never be caught off guard again. The impact was a tragedy, but it was also a transformation, stripping away the trivial to reveal the essential. Generations pass, and the stories of the world before the impact become the foundation of a new global mythology. We begin to understand that the Earth is not a static stage, but a dynamic participant in our survival. The Great Impact Crater in the Yucatan has now cooled, becoming a sacred site of reflection and scientific study. It serves as a permanent monument to the fragility of life and the immense, indifferent power of the cosmos. Scientists in the new enclaves use recovered data to build advanced tracking systems made of salvaged crystal and light. We no longer seek to dominate the universe, but to harmonize with the rhythmic cycles of our solar neighborhood. The age of scars has transitioned into the age of stewardship, where every action is weighed against ecological health. Life in the oceans has rebounded in strange and beautiful ways, with bioluminescent reefs lighting up the dark depths. These deep-sea ecosystems provide a blueprint for how life persists in the absence of direct solar energy. Human settlements have evolved into living organisms, using mycelial architecture that grows and heals alongside its inhabitants. We have traded the cold efficiency of concrete for the warm, pulsing resilience of biological engineering. The memory of the internet is replaced by the Wood Wide Web, a deep connection to the planetary fungal network. We have learned to listen to the chemical signals of the forest, anticipating changes in the weather and soil. This deep integration with nature has cured the ancient loneliness that once plagued our technological ancestors. Our new calendar doesn't count years since a birth or a conquest, but years since the Great Awakening. It is a reminder that we were once asleep to the reality of our place in the cosmic hierarchy. In the quiet evenings, elders tell tales of the metal birds that once filled the sky and the glass towers. The children listen with wide eyes, struggling to imagine a world so disconnected from the breath of the earth. To them, the true miracle is not the ability to fly, but the ability to grow a seed in the ash. We have found our place in the stars by finally learning how to live on the ground. Thousands of years later, the scar in the Yucatan is no longer a wound, but a cradle of biodiversity. The impact crater has become a lush, tropical basin where evolution has taken an entirely new and unexpected path. We see the rise of post-mammalian species, creatures that have adapted to higher carbon levels and a more active Earth. Humanity has settled into a symbiotic role living in harmony with these new inhabitants of our shared home. Our settlements are no longer scars on the landscape, but part of the planetary immune system, helping to regulate local climates. We have built cloud towers, biological towers that release cooling mists to protect the remaining ice caps from excess heat. The memory of the industrial era is a dark fairy tale, a lesson in what happens when a species forgets its scale. We look back at the 21st century not with envy, but with a profound, quiet pity for its frantic, hollow complexity. The global population is small, stable, and deeply connected, functioning as a single, planetary-scale consciousness. Space is no longer a frontier to be conquered, but a neighborhood to be monitored, with deep, patient wisdom. We have placed Sentinel satellites, made of living crystal, in high orbit to watch for any future cosmic intruders. If another messenger from the dark approaches, we will not be a divided world of panic, but a unified planet of action. Our technology is now soft, organic, self-repairing, and fueled by the same sunlight that powers the ferns and trees. We have achieved the dream of our ancestors, a civilization that breathes with the rhythm of the Earth itself. The history of life is a record of resilience, a story of how the universe constantly tries to break us and fails. Every extinction event is a door that closes, but it also opens a window to a more profound way of being. We are the survivors of the fire, the children of the ash, and the architects of a more humble and beautiful future. The cosmos is vast and indifferent, yet it has allowed us to endure, to learn, and to finally understand our purpose. Our purpose is not to dominate the stars, but to be the eyes through which the universe experiences its own wonder. The comet didn't end our story. It just gave us a much-needed billion-year perspective on what it means to be alive. But how did we get here, and why does the ghost of this ancient catastrophe still haunt our modern dreams? To understand the future, we must look into the deep past, to the moment when the world first ended. For centuries, humans found strange stones and massive bones that hinted at a world much older than our own. These legends of dragons and giants were our first attempts to explain the remnants of a lost megafauna. In the 19th century, geology revealed that Earth's history was a series of slow changes interrupted by sudden violence. The discovery of the KPG boundary layer provided the first physical evidence of a global reset button. This thin band of sediment, found all over the world, contains levels of iridium, usually only seen in space. It was the smoking gun that proved a celestial intruder once wiped out 3/4 of all life on Earth. This revelation shifted our perspective from a planet of eternal stability to a fragile island in a shooting gallery. We realized that the dinosaurs didn't fail, they were simply playing a game where the rules suddenly changed. Modern science now uses these ancient scars to build models of how our own civilization might handle a strike. We use supercomputers to simulate the heat pulse, the acid rain, and the long, dark winter that follows. These digital apocalypses are not for entertainment, but act as stress tests for our global survival strategies. We've learned that the impact itself is just the beginning of a chain reaction that breaks the biosphere. The real killer is the disruption of the systems we take for granted: light, heat, and the food chain. By studying the winners of the last extinction, we find clues to our own resilience in the face of chaos. We look at the crocodiles, the turtles, and the tiny burrowing mammals that inherited a ruined world. Their survival wasn't a matter of strength, but of flexibility and the ability to endure the unendurable. Today, we are the first species with the power to see the threat coming and actually do something. But the question remains, are we wise enough to prioritize the planet over our own short-term ambitions? The hard truth of our existence is that we live in a cosmic neighborhood where the occasional rock is inevitable. While we worry about our day-to-day dramas, thousands of asteroids are silently drifting through the dark void around us. Scientists have identified the vast majority of planet killers, the giants that could reset our civilization in an afternoon. But the real danger lies in the smaller, darker objects, the ones that absorb light and hide from our current telescopes. A city killer only a few hundred meters wide could appear, with almost no warning, turning a metropolis into glass. This is why the mission to the comet was so vital. It was a test of our species' collective reflexes. We have learned that brute force deflection, like nuclear explosions, might actually make the problem much worse. Shattering a comet could turn a single bullet into a shotgun blast, showering the Earth in 1,000 smaller impacts. Modern researchers are now looking at soft deflection methods, like gravity tractors or high-energy laser arrays. These methods require time, decades of lead time, to gently nudge a cosmic threat onto a safer, distant trajectory. The 6-5 million-year gap between major impacts gives us a false sense of security in our temporary cosmic peace. In reality, we are just the latest inhabitants of a target that has been hit many times before we arrived. Every crater on the moon is a fossilized scream, a record of what happens to a world without an atmosphere. Earth's atmosphere and plate tectonics are like a giant eraser, slowly wiping away the evidence of our violent past. But the scars remain in the deep ocean and the remote deserts, waiting for us to read their warning. If we ignore these signs, we are essentially gambling with the future of every child currently living on Earth. True planetary defense isn't just about rockets and lasers. It's about our ability to cooperate as one single species. It requires us to look past our borders and recognize that a comet doesn't care about our politics or religions. We are all passengers on the same small, blue boat, floating through an ocean that can be incredibly violent. Preparing for the unthinkable is the ultimate test of our maturity as a civilization and our right to exist. In the grand arc of time, the 65 million years since the last great impact are but a momentary breath for our planet. Earth has seen countless species rise and fall, each leaving their own unique signature in the layers of the crust. We often think of extinction as a failure of life, but it is actually the mechanism that drives biological innovation. Without the clearing of the old guard, the complex, conscious life we represent might never have found its opening. The dinosaurs were magnificent, but their departure allowed the tiny, resourceful ancestors of humans to finally step into the light. Evolution is a sculptor that uses the hammer of catastrophe to carve more resilient and adaptable forms of existence. We are currently in a unique window of history where we can witness our own vulnerability and plan for it. Our ancestors survived the Toba supervolcano and the shifting ice of the Pleistocene through sheer social cohesion and grit. They didn't have satellites or nuclear probes, but they had the ability to pass down stories and survival strategies. Today, our digital archives are the modern version of those cave paintings, holding the collective memory of our species. But digital data is fragile. It requires a functioning grid and a stable society to be read and understood. This is why the survivors in our future history prioritize physical books and manual knowledge over brittle electronic storage. They understand that in a post-impact world, a hand-drawn map of a well is worth more than a terabyte of encrypted data. The transition back to a simpler, more grounded existence is not a regression, but a necessary survival adaptation. It is the reclaiming of our primal connection to the soil, the seasons, and the immediate environment around us. In the new world, time is measured by the growth of a tree or the movement of a glacier, not the millisecond. This slower pace of life allows for a deeper, more philosophical engagement with the mystery of our own existence. We begin to ask, not how fast can we go, but how long can we endure in this beautiful, dangerous garden? The answer lies in our ability to maintain the life clock, the delicate balance between our needs and the planet's health. Every generation becomes a guardian of this balance, ensuring that the fire of consciousness continues to burn brightly. If we look back at the history of our planet, we see that catastrophe is not an ending, but a catalyst. The impact of the past taught us that the biosphere is incredibly resilient, but also deeply interconnected. Every species that survived the fire did so because it found a way to cooperate with the changing world. We often view ourselves as separate from nature, but the comet reminded us that we are part of its fabric. This realization is the cornerstone of our new philosophy, where the individual is a cell in a planetary body. We have replaced the me with the we, understanding that isolated survival is a mathematical impossibility. Our new social structures are modeled after the mycelial networks that saved the world during the long winter. These networks exchange nutrients and information across vast distances, ensuring that no pocket of life is left behind. We have learned to distribute our resources according to the needs of the ecosystem rather than the desires of the market. This shift has eliminated the concept of waste, as every byproduct of our life becomes food for another organism. The architecture of our new cities is living, made of engineered wood and self-healing biopolymers. These structures grow over decades, providing shelter that breathes and evolves along with the local climate. We have turned our industrial ruins into biospheres, controlled environments where we study the resilience of life. Here, we test how different combinations of species interact to create stable, self-sustaining microclimates. The knowledge we gain is shared through a global network of way stations using solar-powered laser pulses. Communication is no longer a constant stream of noise, but a rhythmic pulse of essential, life-sustaining data. This silence has allowed us to hear the Earth again, to understand the subtle shifts in its breathing. We can predict a volcanic eruption or a change in ocean currents by listening to the planetary humming. We have moved from a species of loud, frantic builders to one of quiet, patient observers. The Earth is no longer a resource to be mined, but a partner to be nurtured and respected. Looking back across the eons, we realize that the comet was not a curse, but a profound cosmic invitation. It invited us to stop being a collection of competing tribes and start being a single, planetary consciousness. The survivors of the fire didn't just rebuild their homes, they rebuilt the very definition of what it means to be human. We have moved from the age of information to the age of integration, where wisdom is valued over raw data. Our stories no longer celebrate the conquest of nature, but our graceful participation within its complex, beautiful systems. The technology we once used to isolate ourselves has been repurposed to deepen our connection to the living world. We use bioacoustic sensors to translate the songs of the new whales, finding common ground in the deep blue. These marine giants are our partners in monitoring the health of the oceans, acting as mobile, sentient climate stations. On land, our life arcs have become permanent centers of culture and learning, embedded deep within the new forests. They are libraries of the soul, preserving the art, music, and philosophy of a species that refuse to go quiet. Every child learns the history of the impact, not as a horror story, but as the moment of our rebirth. They understand that life is a precious, flickering candle in a vast, cold universe that demands constant tending. We have developed a planetary ethic, where the health of the soil is as important as the health of the community. This ethic ensures that we never again take the sun, the rain, or the air for granted in our pursuits. The Sentinel satellites continue their silent vigil, their crystal eyes scanning the dark for any sign of another messenger. But we no longer watch with fear, we watch with the quiet confidence of a planet that is finally ready. We are ready to defend our home, not just with rockets, but with the unified strength of a mature civilization. The cosmos may be indifferent, but it has produced a species capable of finding meaning in the face of chaos. We have turned the most terrifying event in our history into the foundation of a lasting, peaceful, and sustainable future. The comet came to erase us, but instead it taught us how to truly, deeply, and permanently belong to Earth. As our journey through this future history comes to an end, we are left with a final, echoing question. Is the universe a hostile void, or is it a rigorous teacher testing our worthiness to join the stars? We have seen that life is not just a biological accident, but a persistent force that defines the planet. The comet was a reset, but it was also a reminder that our existence is a privilege, not a right. We carry the genetic memory of every survivor, from the first microbes to the families in the Pyrenees. Their resilience is our inheritance, a deep-seated drive to find the light even in the thickest impact ash. Our story is far from over. In fact, it has only just begun to find its true harmonic rhythm. We stand on the threshold of a new era, looking out at a universe that is both terrifying and sublime. We are no longer afraid of the dark, for we have learned how to generate our own internal light. The Earth will continue its long, slow dance around the sun, and we will be there to witness it. We will be the guardians of the seeds, the keepers of the stories, and the watchers of the skies. Perhaps one day, another traveler from the cosmos will arrive and find not a ruin, but a welcoming garden. They will find a species that learned the hardest lesson of all, that to survive, we must first belong. This belonging is not a matter of geography, but a matter of the heart and our shared cosmic soul. We are the children of the comet, and our future is as bright and enduring as the stars themselves. In the vast silence of the cosmos, the life clock of Earth continues to tick, louder and steadier than ever. We are still here, and in the grand scheme of the universe, that is the most beautiful miracle of all. So, As you look up at the night sky tonight, remember the pale blue dot and its long, violent history. Remember that every breath you take is a gift from a world that has survived 100 apocalypses for you. What will you do with your moment in the sun before the next cosmic messenger arrives to test our strength?